Obinna was a man of ambition, born in the heart of Umuahia, a village rich with vibrant culture and surrounded by lush green hills. He was known for his quick wit and sharp tongue. But unlike others who cherished the warmth of family life, Obinna dreamed of the city's dazzling lights and the promises of wealth far beyond the village's quiet life. His wife, Adaeze, a strong and graceful woman, loved him with a depth few could fathom. Together they had 2 children, Chukwudi, the curious 7-year-old with eyes as bright as the morning sun, and Nena, the giggling 3-year-old who loved to tug at Obinna's beard. One day, while trading at the market, Obinna met Emeka, an old friend who had travelled to the bustling city of Lagos. Emeka boasted of luxurious homes, endless business opportunities, and streets paved with gold. He painted pictures of feasts and fortunes, and in Obinna's mind, the seeds of restlessness began to grow. Obinna soon started staying out late, listening to Emeka's stories and planning his escape. Adais, sensing the change, pleaded with him, "Obinna, what is wealth without your family?" But he dismissed her words as the fears of a woman without vision. One night, with nothing but a promise to send for them soon, Obinna left under the cover of darkness. Adais woke up to find an empty bed and a note that simply said, "For a better future." The village whispered with pity, and Adais held her children tighter, forcing herself to stay strong for them. In Lagos, Obinna discovered that Emeka's stories were half-truths wrapped in deception. The city, far from being the beacon of wealth he had imagined, revealed itself as a maze of challenges and disappointments. The grandeur of Lagos's skyline was shadowed by sprawling slums and the relentless rush of people, all chasing the elusive dream of prosperity. The streets hummed with energy but whispered stories of broken hopes, and in this chaos, Obinna found himself a stranger, an anonymous figure in the throng of desperate souls. With no promised job waiting for him, Obinna had to adapt quickly. The few coins he had brought were soon spent on a small room in a crumbling tenement, its walls stained with the stories of those who came before him and left in failure. Hunger became a constant companion, gnawing at him as he wandered from one end of the city to the other, searching for work. Some days he stood in long lines under the unforgiving sun, hoping for menial labour that paid a pittance. Other days, he swept streets in exchange for a bowl of watery porridge. Obinna's hands, once used to tilling the soft, fertile soil of his village, grew blistered from carrying heavy loads and scrubbing floors in the wealthier parts of the city. He witnessed opulence through barred gates, children playing in lush courtyards, unaware of the hungry eyes watching from outside. The echoes of laughter and the sense of rich food haunted him as he trudged back to his one-room shelter with nothing but the sound of his stomach grumbling. The nights were even harder. In the dim glow of street lamps, he would sit on the edge of his bed, shoulders slumped, listening to the shouts and laughter from the nearby bars and the low wails of those who had succumbed to despair. The loneliness was suffocating, made worse by the occasional letter he started to write to Adais, but could never finish. What could he say? That he had failed? That he had left them for a life that was crumbling in his hands? As the months turned into years, Obinna learned the art of surviving in Lagos. He worked as a porter during the day, lifting sacks of grain for merchants at the bustling docks. The pay was meagre and inconsistent. On rare occasions, he found work assisting masons, where he learned to mix cement and carry bricks until his back ached and his vision blurred. He patched together these odd jobs with fleeting moments of hope, only to have them dashed when he returned to his room, empty-handed and exhausted. Yet the city's deceit did not stop at the harshness of work. Friends were scarce, and betrayal came easily. Once, Obinna pooled what little he had saved with 2 other men who promised a business deal that would double his money. The next day, they disappeared, leaving him penniless and more cautious than ever. With each setback, The reality of his choices sank deeper, weighing on him like an anchor. The letters to Adais, which had once been hopeful and full of promises, stopped. What could he tell her when there was nothing left but stories of survival and shame? He imagined her face, the strength in her eyes, and the children, now older, growing up without their father. Each thought was a dagger to his soul, carving regret into the man he had become. The city was not the paradise he had dreamed of. It was a cage that fed on ambition and left him hollow. But still, he persevered, if only out of stubbornness and the glimmer of hope that one day he might make something of himself and return. As Obinna fought the daily battles for a few naira and scraps of dignity, he realized that the city's gold was not in wealth but in surviving one more day. And each day, that became a victory in itself. Back in Umuahia, Adaize became the rock of her small family, shouldering a burden that grew heavier with each passing day. With Obinna gone, she rose before dawn, her hands blistered from working the fields and weaving intricate baskets late into the night. The earnings were modest, but they kept hunger at bay and provided for her children's basic needs. The weight of Obinna's absence, however, was not just financial. It cast a shadow over their lives that no amount of hard work could lift. Chukwudi, who had once been an eager boy with boundless curiosity, grew up faster than any child should. With each sunrise, he took on responsibilities meant for a man, not a boy of 7. He carried firewood, tended to their small plot of land, and helped Adais haul baskets to the market, his small frame bent but never breaking. Villagers noticed the determined set of his jaw, the way he listened closely when adults spoke of farming and trade, as though preparing himself for challenges far greater than his age. But while Chukwudi's hands became strong, his eyes lost the playful sparkle they once held. The boy who once raced down the village paths barefoot now walked with the quiet, steady pace of someone who bore unseen weights. Nena, on the other hand, was too young to remember the days when their father's laughter filled their home. She grew up on stories Adais told by the light of a flickering oil lamp, tales of how Obinna would lift her high into the sky or mimic the calls of birds to make her giggle. But as the seasons passed and those memories remained nothing more than words, Nena became quieter. Her laughter, once so easy and full, turned into rare, fleeting moments. She followed her brother around the village, mimicking his stoic expressions, even when she longed to ask him why their father never returned. The absence etched an unspoken question into her small heart. Why did Papa leave? And would he ever come back? The whispers in the village grew over time. Such a strong woman, that Adais, the elders would say, nodding approvingly as they watched her at work. Obinna was a fool, others murmured, shaking their heads with a mix of pity and scorn. The stories of Obinna's departure and the struggle that followed became part of village lore, a cautionary tale shared among the young. But Adais never flinched when she heard those words. Instead, she focused on keeping the family afloat and ensuring her children knew they were loved, even if one piece of their lives was missing. Chukwudi's resentment simmered beneath the surface, a feeling he could never fully express. He would look at the distant hills, the same ones his mother gazed at with silent hope, but with an anger that burned in his chest. He wanted to know if his father felt any regret, if he understood the sacrifices they had made without him. The weight of those unspoken questions turned Chukwudi into a protective older brother, watching over Nena with a seriousness that made even the adults pause. Adaize noticed these changes, the way Chukwudi's shoulders stiffened when Obinna's name came up, or how Nena would linger by the door, staring into the distance as though expecting a visitor who never came. Yet, Adaize's heart never hardened. Each night, after her children had fallen asleep, she would look up at the stars above the hills and pray silently. "Bring him back to see what he left behind," she whispered. not in bitterness but in the hope that one day the children would know the man their father had once been, before ambition and deception led him astray. The bond between mother and children grew strong under these hardships. Chukwudi learned the value of resilience from his mother and vowed to protect his sister and mother with a tenacity born of loss. Nena, for all her quietness, found comfort in Adaeze's stories, still believing that one day, perhaps when she was older, the man from the stories might come home. And so, life continued in Umuahia, not untouched by pain, but bound by a thread of hope that refused to break, even under the strain of years and unanswered prayers. Years later, an older and weary Obinna stood at the edge of the village, clothes tattered and eyes hollow. The city had not been kind to him. He had finally saved enough to return, but not before realizing that wealth was worthless without the ones you loved. As he walked through the familiar streets, he saw Chukwudi, now a young man, his eyes hard and unwelcoming. Nena, nearly a woman now, looked at him with sadness rather than recognition. Adaeze, still beautiful, but with lines of worry etched into her face, watched him from a distance. Obinna fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. Adaeze, I have returned, but I have nothing left but apologies, he whispered. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the distant chatter of village life. The children stood behind their mother, Chukwudi with a stony expression and Nana with eyes that held cautious curiosity. They were no longer the small children he remembered. They had grown strong and capable without him. Adaeze's gaze was steady as she took in the man before her, weary and broken. We have rebuilt our lives, Obinna, she said, her voice carrying both strength and a deep-seated weariness. We survived and we learned to thrive, but our children deserve to see that forgiveness is possible. She extended her hand, not with warmth, but with the firm resolve of someone who knew the value of peace. It was not an invitation to return to how things were, but an offering of a chance to prove himself. The days that followed were hard for Obinna. The village was not the same place he had left, and his family had moved on without him, carving out a life that was whole in its own way. Chukwudi had grown into a young man with the sharp eyes of someone who had learned to read people early. He worked tirelessly alongside his mother, no longer needing the father who had abandoned them. When Obinna tried to help, Chukwudi's silence spoke louder than any words. Nena, now blossoming into adulthood, watched him from a distance. Her kindness still lingered, but trust was something Obinna had to earn. She would nod politely when he spoke, yet there was an invisible wall between them that echoed the years of absence. Obinna threw himself into the work, determined to earn not just their forgiveness, but their acceptance. He joined Chukwudi in the fields, lifting heavy sacks and planting seeds under the relentless sun. His hands, which had grown soft in Lagos with odd jobs that offered little reward, toughened once more with blisters. When the day's work ended, he stayed behind to repair broken tools, mend fences and gather firewood, tasks that he hoped would show that he was there to stay. Adaeze watched from afar, her heart conflicted. She saw the way Obinna's shoulders sagged at the end of the day, the way he looked longingly at their family sitting together, sharing a meal without him. He ate alone in silence, nodding when Adaeze passed him food but speaking only when spoken to. Slowly, moments of progress began to appear, small and tentative. One evening, Chukwudi, exhausted from a particularly long day in the fields, accepted a cup of water from Obinna without turning away. It wasn't much, but it was the first time their eyes met with something other than resentment. Nena began to ask questions, her voice hesitant. "Tell me about Lagos, Papa," she said one evening, standing just outside the light of the lantern. Obinna's throat tightened, but he spoke, not embellishing the hardship, but laying bare the struggles and regrets that had weighed him down. Over time, the household shifted, slowly making space for him. Adaze's expression softened, not with the affection of the past, but with the recognition that he was no longer the man who had left them. He was older, wiser, and willing to pay the price of humility for his mistakes. Obinna learned to see the small joys he had overlooked before. Chukwudi's quiet strength when he guided Nena through a task, Adaezi's soft hum as she prepared food, the laughter that filled the air when the children joked with one another. He came to realize that forgiveness wasn't a moment, but a process, one that required the steady molding of trust, like clay taking form under patient hands. And as the seasons turned, Obinna found his place not as a hero returning home, but as a man rebuilding the bonds that had once held his world together.